Hey guys, today we're going to learn about Nginx server blocks, or virtual hosts. Now in Nginx they're called server blocks, in Apache they're called virtual hosts, so if you're familiar with Apache you might be familiar with that alternate term. So this is our little write-up on the topic, and this guide basically shows you how to this is all about server blocks. Now you may or may not be familiar with our other guide over in this other tab here for setting up the Nginx web server on Linux, and this is a general guide. And in this guide you'll notice we did cover server blocks, but we were this was a little bit more brief and it wasn't a full example, and we didn't actually we also went over a few other things like SSL and in PHP and stuff like that, but that's a little bit out of scope for today. Today we're going to try to get into server blocks in a bit more detail. So we're going to cover all of this stuff. We're basically going to set up two different sites on the same server. So if you don't know what server blocks or virtual hosts are, it's basically it lets you run multiple sites on a single web server. So you could basically have a single VM or single server, and you'll have you can even have just one IP address, and on a single IP address you can serve multiple different websites, and it will look as if each one is its own server. So you only need one server and one IP address, and you can run as many websites as you want, and that's kind of the appeal of this to a lot of people. And if you're running in a bigger environment, maybe you do have multiple servers with multiple IPs, and you just want to run more than one website per IP, depending on your use case. But in any case, before I jump into this and show this guide will show you how to convert a regular Nginx server serving one site to a server serving two sites, and you could also expand it to just serve as many sites as you want. So before we actually do this, we're going to quick show you how to install Nginx. I have a fresh VM here just spun up. I've just cloned this, so we're going to SSH into the server real first. And there we go. We're logged into our server right now. Maybe I should zoom this in a little bit. I can just zoom out a little bit later if need be. All right, so we're going to jump over to this tab, and we're going to quick just install Nginx. Just have a fresh install, and just to make this video a little bit more complete. Skip this part if you have already seen it. So I'm going to paste this in here. So just do an apt-get update to make sure we have the latest information on our packages, and this should be over pretty quick. I just ran this a little bit ago, and it went relatively quickly. There we go, it's done. Paste in the command to actually install Nginx, and let's see, should be over in a second. Now what I wanted to do was quick turn off server tokens, just to, because it would make me feel like let's just skip that for today. Now normally during my install of Nginx, I would recommend disabling server tokens. That's a little bit out of scope, and we don't need to do that for this video. You could watch the other video if you want to see how to do that. You know what, this takes let's just do it. This takes only a second anyway, just for the sake of completion. So server, and there we go, server tokens. So we're going to have this setting server tokens off, makes it a bit more secure, even though we're going to delete this server in a little bit anyways. So yeah, bounce, we can bounce Nginx. So these two commands will test the config file and bounce it, and there we go. So we have Nginx up and running, and we basically followed our instructions we normally like to follow to install Nginx. Now there's more stuff below, but that's a bit out of scope for today's video. So let's jump back over to our server blocks guide. Now let's jump over here, and we're just gonna view our server. So our server, I called it server 1, and there we go. Now this is the default page you get when you load Nginx. So this is welcome to Nginx. This is the default page that just comes with it. So we're actually accessing our server directly, server 1. Now the two sites we're going to create are called example. They're called example.org and test.com. So one way you can test that at the bottom here, I left a little note about testing, and these are not the IPs we're going to use, but anyways, so you could actually, if you do have the well, I guess the first thing you want to do is make sure it's installed, right? But secondly, if you have your domains, like if you own the domains, make sure they're pointing to your server, or to your server's IP address. And if you don't own the domains and you just want to test this out, maybe you have like example domains or something, you're going to want to, one trick you can do is put those in your etc hosts file, assuming you're running Linux on the desktop. If not, there are equivalent tricks you can run on Windows or Mac OS. And you know, worst case, you could set up a DNS server, but that's kind of your own DNS server. That's kind of overkill just for testing. Anyways, I'm going to open up another terminal here, and so this terminal is on my local desktop, and I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to grep my hosts file, grep server1 etc hosts. So as you can see here, let's make that a little bit more. Oh yes, that is pretty readable. All right, so what as you can see, this is the IP address of our test server we're testing with today, 192.168.3.3, and my desktop is 192.168.3.22. So the name of the server is server1. And the two example sites we want to use are example.org and test.com. Example.org is intended for examples, so if you were to go there normally, it's going to bring up this example site saying, hey, this is for testing, blah, blah, blah. Test.com is an actual site in use by some company for some purpose that I'm not familiar with, but both of these are real sites on the internet. But when I put these in my etc hosts file and make sure I clear my cache and everything, I can go to these sites, like let's try example.org, and these are now pointing to my server. So when I go to server 1, it leads me to this default Nginx page. So I'm going to open up another tab and try going to example.org. Example.org right here brings me to that same page. Now you might think that's great, but that's not kind of what we're going for. We want these each to be separate sites. So test, oops. Yeah, I guess I could just type that in too. All right, test.com. So test.com, example.org, and server1 all point to the exact same default Nginx site. So they're all pointing to our web server that we just installed about a minute ago. So that web server we installed here is being pointed to by all three of those. Now, really, we only want this default, our server name to go to the default page, and example.org and test.com should be going to separate websites, which we're going to set up in just a sec. All right, so step one after all of that. So the next thing you're going to, let me just close this here. Let's take a quick look at what's in our var www. So ls-l var www, and you'll notice we have an HTML file in there, or an HTML directory in there. Inside HTML, we have our default Nginx Debian file. So if you were to, let's see, let's try to cat this file. So that's what's in that file. It says welcome to Nginx, blah, 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 has all that stuff that we saw over here. All of this over here, that's this file right here in your var www HTML, and you put the index file here, and that's the file that's served by default. So our HTML directory under var www is where all of our HTML is served for this Nginx server. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do an mkdir. Instead of that HTML directory, we're going to create directories for each of our sites, and each of those sites is going to have an HTML directory, its own HTML directory within it. So we're going to do an mkdir-p. The -p lets you do it recursively, so you don't have to first create example.org directory and then HTML. You can create both directories in one shot, and we're using sudo because I believe the directory is probably owned by root right now. It might not be. Let's see. Yeah, so it's root owned. Yeah, so everything's root there. So we're going to use sudo, but we're going to be choning that in a bit anyways. So anyways, I'm creating those directories. So this is what var www will look like right now. So we still have our HTML directory in our default, Debian index HTML, but we now have example.org and test.com. So first thing I want to do is chown these directories so changing the ownership to be owned by user 1. Now user 1 is the user I'm logged in as. That's the user I would be uploading HTML files as, and working on the server as. That's like my regular account for working on stuff on the server, so I want that to have access to the website because that's just the account that's supposed to have access to the web data. Let's see here. So I'm going to chown that whole, instead of choning each of these individually, I'm just going to chown the whole var www directory. And there we go. So there we go, all owned by user 1 now. And let's see here. We're gonna chmod it. So we're gonna change the permissions on it too, just to make sure they're set up the way we like. And that should probably not change anything actually. Yeah, so anyways, next thing we want to do, I actually prefer VI over Nano, but if you're new to Linux or Unix, Nano might be easier for you. So and notice we don't need to sudo because these files should belong to us now. So we're going to VI this file, and so we're going to do example.org first, and we are just going to go right ahead and paste in an example file for this first site, and it says site1 test, site1 test. All right, since this is test, this is example.org, maybe I'm just gonna I'm just gonna add the text in here. There we go, just to help us identify which one it really is, and then we can create the other one, the other index.html file for our other site. So let's paste this in here, and paste this other HTML file in here. And you'll notice this other HTML file, it says site2, so you can tell it apart. But I'm just going to add test in there anyways, just to make sure, just to make it really, really clear. Test.com. Okay. Just to make it a better demo, I guess. All right, so important, you can only have one default server block. Default server option can only be enabled on one server block. So anyways, so that will show us, like, if you were to go to server 1, it has to pick which virtual host to go to, and you can't configure each of the virtual hosts to be the one that you would go to by default. So you can only put that default setting on one of your virtual hosts. So we're not doing it on any of them right at the moment, and we're going to see how that works out. So we're going to copy. So our sites basically our virtual hosts are in Etsy Nginx sites available. So we are going to copy the default, and we're just going to overwrite it anyway, so it doesn't matter, but that's a good place to start if you weren't just going to straight up overwrite it. We're going to copy it over to sites available example.org. So let's ls that directory first. Nginx sites available. So you can see there's only a default in there right now. So we're going to copy that over. Let's see how important that really was. So sudo vi, and feel free to use nano instead of vi if you prefer. And there we go. So sudo vi sites available example.org. Now, oh yeah, so this is a big, big virtual host definition. There's no point in really copying that because I'm just going to delete this whole thing anyways. So you don't have to copy that. You could just skip that step where you copy it. Note that this whole directory is owned by root. So everything you do is going to be done with sudo. Because these are config files for the daemon. These aren't just the web files that we normally interact with as a regular user. So we don't want them to belong to our regular user. Anyways, so let's paste this example file in here. Copy it, paste it right here. All right, so this is our definition for our first virtual host. So you'll notice there's this server block up here, just called server, and you'll notice it listens on port 80, and it also does that for IPv6, and so this would be IPv4, and then IPv6 right here. And it specifies the root for this virtual host, which is var www example.org html. That's the directory we just created just a little bit ago. And these are the index files it's going to search for by default. So first it searches for something called index, then index.html, index.htm, and then this big long, index.nginx debian.html. So that's the order it will search in to find an index file. And server name is example.org. So if someone is trying to access your server using the hostname example.org, it's going to send it to this virtual host. Now, if they use a different host name but accessing the same IP address, it's going to send them to the other virtual host. So it decides which virtual host to use based on which host name you're using to access it. Even if it's the same, they all map out to the same IP address, whatever host name is in your URL bar, whatever host name you're trying to access, it will see what you're trying to access, and the web server will send you to the correct site. The location is the root location. It says try files, URI with a slash on it, and so on. So anyways, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a pretty short little config file. So we're gonna write that out, and let's move right along here so we can copy this file over to our next site, and then just change the variables where needed. We're gonna skip that because we're just going to copy and paste this snippet in here anyways. But if we didn't have this snippet already prepared, then yeah, we would want to copy the site we just created over to our new site. So our example.org over to test.com. Anyways, so let's create a virtual a server block config file for test.com. So sudo vi, and paste this in here, and we are going to just paste this whole configuration in here. Whoops. Copy this whole thing, and there we go. So this is the exact same thing that we just looked at, except the root is slightly different. Instead of example.org, it's test.com, and the server name is test.com instead of example.org. So basically save that file. Now we're going to create links. Now notice we looked inside Etsy Nginx sites.available. So these are sites that are available for use but not necessarily in use. Now if you look at sites, so you're going to look at sites enabled, and these are the sites that are actually enabled for use. And you'll notice default is pointing to our default site, but so that one is enabled, but you'll notice sites available. You'll notice like example.org and test.com, they are not enabled, so there is no link. So any site that you want to enable, you basically create a symlink from the sites. You create a symlink inside the sites enabled directory, pointing to your site configuration in the sites available directory. So that's basically it. So we're going to do sudo ln-s and basically create a couple symlinks here. So paste these symlinks in, and now we're going to run ls on that directory again. And you'll notice, you know what, let's just make this terminal bigger. And there we go. So now you can see the links. All right. So default pointing to here, and you see each of them inside sites enabled points to the equivalent version in sites available. And there you go. That's how you set that part up. So next, let's that's basically it. We're gonna want to restart, but first we want to yeah, we're gonna use vi, not nano, every single time here. Sudo vi. I still think I probably should leave nano in there because it's easier for people who are beginners. So inside this file, we're going to set the server. Let's see, server names. Okay, server names hash bucket size. So anytime we enable virtual hosts, or rather server blocks, we make sure this value is set. And now we're going to verify that all of our configs that we just created are valid. So we're going to run sudo nginx-t, and it says syntax is okay, test is successful. That doesn't mean you didn't point to the wrong location or something. It just means you didn't make any syntax errors in your config files. So finally, let's restart Nginx. So sudo systemctl restart Nginx. Now Nginx has been restarted. Now the last thing you would do is, or I actually do this first, but maybe I should just put this at the beginning, but your etc hosts file should have your sites in it, which ours does already. So you're going to navigate to these URLs in your browser, which we already have open over here. So we're going to see, let's try going to server 1, reload this, and it still brings us to the default location that says welcome to Nginx. Now example.org, let's try reloading this and see if it works. Oh, there we go. Example.org now brings us to Site 1 test. You see that in the title in the tab there. It says Site 1 test example.org. Now let's go over to test.com and reload that. There we go. So test.com, site 2 test, site 2 test, test.com. So now these are all still on the same server, same IP address, but depending on which host name you specify, you will go to a different virtual host. So just specifying the name of your server brings you to the default right here. Specifying example.org brings you to the site that we defined for example.org, and test.com brings you to test.com. Now let's see here. Let's say if we wanted to, that's about everything, but let's take a quick look and see. Let's jump into sites available. And let's look at some of these. So let's look at default just to see the configuration. Now, okay, you'll notice one thing besides the fact that it has a ton of comments in here, because this is meant to be used as like a template to build your configurations. But you'll notice on these listen lines at the beginning here, it says default server. So this is the default server that you'll go to by default. Now, if we wanted to, I don't think I'm going to do this, but I believe we could set example.org to see. Notice here after the listen lines, it doesn't say default server. You could set one of these to be your default server if you wanted. I don't see any point in really doing that ever, because that would be almost like having a duplicate site. And the idea just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I would never do that. Or I can't think of a use case for doing that. But worth pointing out, just so you know, you're aware of what this option does. So if you had copied this default file over to one of your virtual hosts, you would have wanted to make sure to delete that. So delete this default server when you're setting these up. So what I did was I just copied and pasted the configuration in. But if you were to copy that default file over to your example.org, you're going to change everything, like the the root directory and the server name. But you're also going to want to make sure it doesn't say default over here. It's not going to be, you don't want to set this up. You don't want to set all your virtual all of your server blocks as being the default. That could cause serious issues. That would be a big configuration issue. So you'd want to avoid doing that, and you want to understand what that does. So that's pretty much it. I think that covers everything for today. I think we've gone over everything we want to cover. So hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully this gets somebody up and running. You might want to give us a thumbs up. If you want more videos like this, you might want to hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell icon so you get alerts when we come out with new videos. We have a lot of great content like this, but we also have a lot of other different things. We have things related to code, electronics, 3D printing, robots, and basically anything you can think of that's tech related. Single board computers, Raspberry Pis. We're going to be working with databases, messaging servers, and all kinds of great technology. So if you're into technology, this is the type of thing you might want to subscribe to. Also, if you have any comments, questions, criticisms, whatever you want to say, definitely leave a comment down below. I try to read and sometimes, most of the time, reply to every comment that I can. Eventually anyways, at least for the time being. So definitely we want to know what you think. So do leave a comment down below. And that's pretty much it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it useful. But that's it. So we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.